I'm the Ripper, Slasher, Terror in the Night. I am Batman.
No, please. No!
Bow to your god and pretend it's some omnipotent being in the sky who favors you above all else. And try your hardest to forget what I tell you now, that it is those of us who conquered the world that you truly pray to, whether you realize this or not. And should we refuse to answer those prayers, you will soon see how little your god actually does care as the indifference of the universe crushes your apathy. I want to talk about disincentives and the gross tendency of salesmen appealing to and promoting the worst habits and qualities in people in order to boost their self-esteem and provide self-validation, which of course encourages said consumers to come back for more self-esteem and more self-validation, which boosts sales in turn.
Son of a bitch!
Or worse, it's simply because weak motherfuckers are too afraid to hurt other weak motherfuckers' feelings, so they develop a communist system where nobody loses and everybody wins, excluding those of us intelligent enough to understand that when everybody wins, nobody does. It started when I was in elementary school. We had monthly assemblies where the whole school would gather in the cafeteria and they would give out academic awards. They'd give out a lot of those fucking things. At every assembly, at least a couple kids from each class would get them. The achievements that warranted these awards for individual accomplishment varied from perfect attendance to most creative to perfect GPA. The kids that won got to go stand up in front of the cafeteria with stupid fucking grins on their faces as the rest of the school was forced to sit on the ground and watch them. At the age of 7, I so badly wanted to win. You know, I'm an extremely competitive attention whore. It's why I'm on YouTube. It's how I was born. I wanted to get an award. I wanted to be at the front of the cafeteria so everyone could see that I was special too. I stepped up my efforts to be awesome. I got my homework in on time. I got to class early and stayed late. I even signed up for the school play. And the months dragged on, yet I still was not called at the monthly assembly. I began to pay close attention to who got awards for what so that I might do whatever it was that they did. But I began to notice inconsistencies. For one, every Hmong kid in my class had perfect attendance, but only one of them had received an award for it. If that was one of the categories to earn an award for, why didn't the other perfect attendees get it? Then I realized that everyone had an award for something different. The same award was never given out twice. Then I noticed that nobody ever got more than one award. Then, complete dumbass fuckwit students who would literally insult the teacher to her face got awards before me. I started putting the pieces together, and it wasn't long until I figured out that everyone was going to get one award no matter what, and that every award would be different. I was even clever enough to deduce that the order of awards was based on birthdays. The kids born in January were the first to be awarded, and as my birthday is in September, I was probably at the very bottom of the list. It was just a scam. And what purpose did it serve? To make us feel good about ourselves? Well, it seemed to work wonders on all the other kids in the class. I wished I hadn't put it together, because now I realized it was just all for show, some strange little lie we were all living. Finally, in the last month of school, I was called up to the front of the cafeteria. My award was for being funny. I was the class fucking clown. What a fucking achievement. By the time I took my spot standing in front of the school, as I'd yearned to do for so long, I was embarrassed. Later on in my academic career, I joined the track team. I ran sprints and I was very fast. I held a 10.8 PR on the 100 meter my sophomore year, which was enough to win me the division championship at the junior varsity level. They bumped me up to varsity to compete on the 4x1 at state. What I liked about track was that when I won, it was me who won. I got to bask in my glory. I got to feel special for a little while after each race as people clapped for me as I was handed brass medals made in China. But nobody really came to watch track meets because they aren't that fun to watch, especially at the high school level, so the rush of victory was short-lived, and the next day, nobody would know unless you told them. But if you went around telling people how fast you were, you just seemed like an arrogant, insecure prick, which is what I was, but of course I didn't want people to know that, so I kept my victories to myself. I learned to cherish the brief moments of self-validation I had in front of complete strangers, parents of other kids on the track team or from the opposing school. Finally, at the end of the year, we had a banquet where the whole team and all their friends and families showed up to commemorate the end of a fine track season. Each event in track had its own individual coach, who were to give out 2 awards each, so 2 hurdlers, 2 sprinters, 2 throwers, etc., etc. I was the fastest JV sprinter and the only sophomore to get bumped to varsity. I was hoping there would be an award for that. The crowd at the banquet was 100 times more populated than any track meet I had ever been to, and it was all people from my school or city. I yearned for their love and admiration. And it is a perverse vanity, but feelings are something we cannot truly manipulate, only stifle and hide from the world. 2 awards were given to 2 sprinters, and neither of them was me. The first award was for most improved. The second was for best attitude. I thought both of these could have very easily been rolled into one single award. The kiss-ass who can't run fast achievement. I felt hugely disappointed afterwards. I think mostly because I was certain there had to be an award for being the fastest. I had been expecting an award for being the best. How naive of me. I began to rationalize my what? My defeat, my loss, my failure, my bad luck, or simply the fact that motherfuckers cater to the weak and shun the strong, because they were once weak themselves, and still are, and hold a deep-rooted grudge born out of envy against the strong. I was getting way too worked up over this, I told myself. I felt silly. It's just high school sports. Nobody cares. It doesn't even matter. 4 years from now, it won't even have mattered whether you got this award or didn't. Who gives a shit? Why do I care about this? There's nothing to be gained from it. It's silly, not even worth being upset over. It's just high school sports. It doesn't even matter. But this is of course a double-edged sword. I unsheathed it to feel better about myself that night after the banquet, but the next logical question is, if high school sports and track don't matter, if they truly are meaningless, if this will all have been some pointless exercise and wasting time 4 years from now, why am I doing it? It's a lot of hard work after all, but it's for nothing, isn't it? So why? Why, Mr. Anderson? Why do you persist? I slept on it. And the next day I realized I didn't want to do track anymore. It wasn't out of grief or anger, it was this sort of odd detachment, as if I'd been living in a fantasy land and had now awoken. I saw no point in continuing, because after all, it really didn't matter. Nobody cares. Because we live in a world which has no winners, in which talent is not indicative of or required for accomplishment, in which the skills of the few are subjugated to the butthurt of the masses. I now speak of Battlefield 4, whose skill gap has seen more shrinkage in the last year than in the decade before it. The basic tenet and fundamental beauty of competition, true competition, is that the higher your skill, the higher your reward. Whether that skill be with a sword or a pen or a controller, whether the reward is monetary or abstract. The higher your skill, the higher the corresponding reward. Previously in Battlefield, this standard was obliged with things like the helicopter, a tool of destruction which the vast majority of players cannot even fly. And many of those who can still cannot strafe and aim at the same time. It is a difficult vehicle to master, both in its physical maneuvering and in the advanced strategic timing and peripheral awareness tactics required just to keep the motherfucker in the air. What with AA tanks and their active fucking radar, fucking Stingers, RP fucking Gs nowadays, we got fucking anti-air mines, we got the motherfucking jets of course, with their heat seekers that they fire at point fucking blank, and tanks, light and heavy, with anti-air sabot shells in every 50 cal available, whether it's mounted on a boat or some bitch Jeep motherfucker. Oh, and you gotta make sure not to get rammed like a hoe at some inopportune motherfucking moment. There are literally dozens on dozens of different ways to counter air vehicles, and there always have been, and it's always taken a lot of practice to time your strafes correctly and always having that one piece of cover you can retreat to at a moment's notice. It's the skill gap that must be overcome to reap the benefits of air combat, and of course the reward for overcoming such a gap was succulent. The rivers ran thick with the blood of the sinners the day I first felt I had really mastered the chopper on Battlefield 3. But this is of course unacceptable to EA, because the players who take the time to learn to fly and make war from the air in a chopper are in an extreme minority. And when this minority excels, it is at the expense of the majority, because not only is the majority unable to fly, they are also seemingly incapable of working together to enact any number of basic anti-air combos such as the SOFLAM and a Javelin, or even just 2 Stingers timing their shots properly. Indeed, in past Battlefields, all it ever took to properly counter air support was 2 soldiers willing to work together with Stingers. But that was beyond the majority's capabilities, and so the majority continued to suffer and feel helpless in the face of helicopters, and when a vast majority suffers only to provide enjoyment for an extreme minority, it hurts sales, because the minority of players who do get good with a chopper are outnumbered literally by the 100,000s, and therefore have significantly less spending power. They who have a vested interest in continuing to sell as many Battlefield copies as possible will of course think it's irrational to let this minority hurt the majority's time and level of enjoyment on the game, and thus statistically speaking decrease the amount of copies sold next time they release a new game. Because kids have to be having a good time now in order for them to feel the desire to one-up later on. And they give even less fucks about air support because the minority of players that are strong helo pilots are also generally hardcore Battlefield fans and veterans of the series, so they are likely to buy the next Battlefield regardless because they have a personal connection in history with the series. But of course your biggest fans can only be slapped in the face so many times before they realize this just isn't their game anymore. And that's what we see happening with Call of Duty, frankly. So on top of all these anti-air capabilities that have always been in Battlefield that I've already listed, DICE took huge steps this year to further nerf air support in helicopters especially, but even vehicles in general beyond all reason. The countermeasure recharge time, which has basically been tripled from Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 4. In Battlefield 3 it was 10 seconds, now in Battlefield 4 it's 25 seconds, plus an extra few seconds at the end after the timer's gone down where it just stays at 0 for some reason. In Battlefield 3, your vehicle got disabled when you fell below 40 health. In Battlefield 4, you get hit by one rocket regardless of how much damage it does, you're gonna be disabled. So you're motherfucking Martin Sheen making your approach in the chopper, you are assaulting ground forces on the D flag, an enemy infantry unit deploys his advanced Stinger technology. It takes about 3 seconds to get the lock and fire, and he does. So you deploy your countermeasure and immediately reverse course to run away. Now let's say you do escape. Well, now you gotta wait 25 fucking seconds hiding behind a building or something before you can even try to play the game again. I mean, you literally just have to sit there and wait for half a minute. But when you really start to understand how fucked you are is when you come back up out of cover and realize the guy with the Stinger is just waiting on you. I mean, he knows you're behind that building. If you try to go anywhere else, he's going to lock on and fire, and you're either going to have to redeploy the countermeasures you just waited for to recharge for the last 25 seconds, and then you're going to have to repeat the whole cycle of waiting for your countermeasures to recharge again behind that same piece of cover, at which point you can try and escape again, but chances are that little bitch is still waiting on you, at which point you're stuck in an infinite loop of getting shot at and waiting to recharge your countermeasures. Meanwhile, you don't get to play the game, and it's one guy, one other player who's doing this to you. Or you won't even get that far because when you try to escape the first time, you're going to get hit by that single rocket and get disabled. And really, getting disabled is essentially the same as death, because here's the infuriating thing. Motherfuckers can reload and fire their Stinger or Igla before you have time to come out of disable. So he will hit you with another rocket before you have even regained control of your helicopter, and then you get re-disabled. It basically turns the rocket into a one-shot kill, because the first shot disables you, and then you're literally defenseless, and all you can do is helplessly flail about while that one fucker fires more rockets at you, which he fires faster than you can get away. Because usually you're not even going to be able to get to cover to let your countermeasures recharge in the first place. Because the simple god-awful truth of this game is that one infantry unit with a Stinger has an extreme advantage over the helicopter. Because the Stinger and the Igla are fucking OP and have ridiculous range. The Stinger range is 350 meters, on the Igla it's 450 meters. What that means is that rarely are you going to be able to escape, because none of the other countermeasure options are going to give you enough time to travel 350 meters, which means once the countermeasure has been deployed, they're going to have plenty of time to get a second rocket off on you, especially because another neat little thing they did for Battlefield 4 was buff the velocity of the rockets so they travel faster and hit harder, which makes it very hard to run away from, and that second rocket will disable you, and as we already know, getting disabled is essentially the same as a one-shot kill, because once you're disabled, they will reload their launcher faster than you can regain control of your helicopter, and they'll get another rocket off on you, and then you're disabled again, and then you fucking die. The overpowered range of these launchers also makes it impossible a majority of the time to kill the person locking onto you, because you're a huge target up in the sky, not very hard to see, and they don't even have to aim, because newsflash, the Stinger doesn't take any fucking skill. You just look at the helicopter with it and the game does the rest for you. Meanwhile, the helicopter cannot possibly see the single infantry unit locking onto it. At 350 meters, that motherfucker is just going to be a microscopic little black dot on your screen, and even if the helicopter could see that motherfucker, it's going to be hard to hit him because helicopters aren't sniper rifles. Fucking rockets and 25mm shells or whatever aren't precision weapons, and if the guy is hiding behind a tree or in a window, there's no possible way for the helicopter to locate and destroy that infantry unit before that infantry unit has time to get off 2 rockets, because again, all it takes is 2 rockets to kill a helicopter, because that second rocket, when you're disabled, that's the same thing as death. Don't forget that. I want to keep driving that point home. And again, rarely are you going to have time to traverse 350 meters before the Stinger guy can get a second Stinger off. So the result of all this is that a single infantry unit, one player with a Stinger or Igla, can go toe-to-toe 1v1 with a helicopter and win that fight a majority of the time, or at the very least keep the helicopter suppressed to the point that it is basically not contributing to the match in any meaningful way, period. And it's along the lines of the same trend we've seen with all games, and especially shooters, these last couple of years. Those of you who watched my Halo 5 multiplayer video will recognize the similarities here. DICE set out to ensure that vehicles did not have more power than infantry. They want infantry to be on the same playing field as vehicles, which really makes vehicles pointless. Even the most skilled helicopter pilot is still basically helpless when fighting a single infantry unit wielding a Stinger, because again, he can get locked on from so far away that even a talented pilot cannot possibly see the enemy locking onto him. And if you're very talented and planned out, you will be able to escape the Stinger, but then you're just stuck in the loop of hiding behind a piece of cover and waiting for countermeasures to recharge, but you can't leave the piece of cover because the Stinger guy is waiting on you, and if you try to escape to a far off range, you're most likely going to die before you can pass 350 meters. All the skill in the world is meaningless in the face of a single infantry unit with a Stinger, and what's extra frustrating about that is, like I already said, the Stinger takes no skill. And I'm not trying to bash kids that use the Stinger. It's obviously the logical thing to do when an air unit starts attacking you, but this has to do with the inherent game balance that is the responsibility of the game developers alone. The Stinger takes no skill. It is a fire and forget weapon. You lock on, fire your rocket, and look the other way and kill a helicopter. Granted, the Igla has to manually maintain the lock until the rocket hits, but it's rewarded for that with an extra 100 meters of range. You basically get to just sit in a window and look at shit in the air, and that, in the eyes of Battlefield 4, is skill equivalent to that of piloting a helicopter. And I mean, look, I don't mean aim precisely and get the chopper in your crosshairs. I mean, you just look at the fucking thing, and the game does the rest for you. Now, on top of all that, DICE was also very, very generous with the anti-air tanks in this game. The anti-air tank can basically hold down half the map from its spawn, or on a map like Lancame Dam, the AA can literally fire heat seekers from one spawn to the other. Your helicopter can get locked onto and shot down in its own spawn from the enemy spawn. And of course, when the AA is camping in its spawn, which it always is because that's how kids play with it, it's impossible for air vehicles to kill it. For one, because it shits on air vehicles, but also because it's in its spawn, it has that fixed AA turret to guard it as well. So really, you have to rely on ground forces to take out the AA, but they are going to have a hard time doing that when they have to push all the way into the enemy spawn and then some. And they put that motherfucker on any map that has helicopters except for Siege of Shanghai. Okay, Conquest on Zavod 113. You get a scout helicopter and the transport helicopter. The transport, keep in mind, had its guns nerfed, so it's literally unusable against anything on the ground. The scout heli is effective, but why do they need to throw in an anti-air tank just to counter one helicopter? I mean, Zavod 113 has no cover really except for two pretty short buildings where motherfuckers are usually on the rooftops, and if so, you have to try to use those buildings for cover. There's a high chance you're going to get RPG'd in the dick, but if you go high, there's that AA that can cover the whole map from its spawn, and that shits on scout helis pretty instantly, and the scout heli is supposed to somehow be able to deal with that AA tank and all the motherfucking Stinger bullshit at the same time. There are only two maps, Dawnbreaker and Siege of Shanghai, which have adequate cover in the form of skyscrapers to allow for consistent dodging of Stingers and or heat seekers. But on every single other map, all the Naval Strike maps, all the China Rising maps, all the Second Assault maps, Paracel Storm, Lancame Dam, Hainan Resort, Golmud Railway, there's basically no cover for the helicopters to use consistently. I mean, on Golmud Railway, if somebody decides to shoot your helicopter with a Stinger, you lose. Game the fuck over. You cannot escape a Stinger on Golmud Railway, or for that matter, the goddamn AA tank. It's fucked up. Now, ground vehicles also got fucked over by the excessively long countermeasure recharge time, and a single rocket disables it as well, because realistically, just as with air support, you're going to have to turn tail and get the fuck out of dodge as soon as you've deployed your countermeasure, because if you try and stay and fight while your countermeasure is activated, chances are you're probably not going to escape to cover afterwards without getting hit by one of the many new and superpowered launchers Battlefield 4 introduced, like the MBT Law, which is a fire and forget launcher that requires no lock-on. And I say cover because it's not even conceivable that you could escape the range of javelins and all that in the time that it takes your countermeasure to wear off. And don't forget the severe repair tool nerf, that engineers could run slams and mines with their launchers, and that because every class has access to carbines, aka a couple of really nifty assault rifles and SMGs, they were previously strategically placed to balance the classes with various advantages and disadvantages. An exponentially larger amount of players are choosing to run engineer in-game at all times because they don't have to give up their AR to do it. So the result of all this is that you can fight with your tank until an enemy decides to shoot back at you, at which point you have no choice but to immediately run very far away and stay away for a good half minute. Battlefield 4 is the first game where vehicles, both air and ground, are consistently on the run from infantry. And that's because in past Battlefields, proper vehicle play has always taken skill and practice. It meant a strong heli pilot could get in a helicopter and have a very good game and really put some hurt on the enemy team. And then one of the kids on that enemy team who just got shit on by the heli is like, oh, that guy did really good. I'm going to get in the helicopter and I'll do really good too because that thing is really powerful. But then that kid gets shit on in the heli because the heli takes a lot of skill refined over time with practice to utilize properly, and thus that kid goes, wah, this game is fucking bullshit, I'm playing Call of Duty. It is weak and pathetic, a mark of shame on mankind, and in the name of greed, seeking to retain customers for higher profit, DICE deliberately decided to actively cater to and thus encourage and promote these horrible human tendencies. That of the sloth and its laziness, its incompetence, as it grabs its own arm thinking it's a tree branch and falls to its own death. From the beginning, Battlefield set out to defeat COD, but is this truly the only way that can be accomplished? By doing exactly what COD does, preying on human weakness as opposed to promoting human strength and resolve? This is people's problem. They only create things to have things, money, stuff. But what of pride, of honor? Is there no person left willing to create in the name of creation and not the pay stub? The best products are the ones that make people better. It should be about shaping the world in the way you think best, because it is the power of impact, a footprint on the fucking earth and its children, signifying where you took your stand, that breeds immortality. Not the brief instant within an instant that is extra zeros. And no, not all currency is of ill faith or to be shunned, disparaged, or ridiculed. Only the currency which you earned with a sacrifice of quality, because then you are truly and totally a sellout. Please remember to rate. This is Batman, signing out.
I spotted the EAA.
Alright, do what you gotta do, do what you gotta do.
Xbox. What the fuck? It just took me to the store. Xbox, stop listening.
Only in Xbox Field 4. What the? Oh my god, what? Dude, no! It did it to me! No! 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 Oh my god, dude! Oh, PlayStation Master Race. Why would you ever want that?
What is? I don't. It took you to the store?
Yeah, it was from your command, dude.